Hi, this is John Curtis on day 7. It was a week ago today that I was sworn in. It's been very important to me that I figure out a way to communicate with you my thoughts on tax reform. So I'm going to record this video. I'm going to apologize at the very beginning that it's not very organized, that it might be a little bit boring, but there's a lot of thoughts up in my head that I'm trying to articulate that aren't, you just can't tweet, right? This is not a few characters or a quick social media post. But I wanted to give some serious thoughts with you and share them with you. And if you have the patience to listen to the whole thing, then hopefully you'll get a better sense of why I voted in favor of the tax reform. First of all, let me say that during the campaign, it was real important to me when we talked about tax reform that it do 3 things. The first is that it simplified taxes. Right now, Americans spend 8.9 billion hours preparing taxes, and many of you will know and relate to this, that simplification is just very, very important. We've complicated this thing beyond reasonableness. The second is that it's fair. I know a lot of people that don't feel like the taxes are fair. I've compared it to sitting on getting a ticket on an airline and sitting next to somebody that paid half as much as you did for the ticket because they called at a different time, before or after you. And a lot of Americans feel like that when they fill out their tax forms, if they just knew more, if they had a better accountant, that they wouldn't have to pay as much money, and that somehow others are not paying as much money. And that's because of these large number of loopholes that people take advantage of. So it was important to me that it was fair. Third thing is that it was predictable. Whatever we put in needs to be in place. We've seen this last tax reform has been in place 30 years. And it's got to be able to last and be predictable for people to make decisions going forward. So let me talk right now about the process that I think is really important. I found myself voting on tax reform 3 days after I was sworn in. So obviously, people will know and understand that I didn't have an opportunity to give my input into the bill. And that was concerning to me, but I gained comfort in the fact that there is a process going on here of give and take. When the House passes their bill, it is not a final bill by any means. It doesn't have to be a perfect bill. It then moves to the Senate, and as you've all seen, the Senate now is talking about some very different points than the House did. And I believe they'll eventually, hopefully they'll pass a bill in the next few weeks that will be different than the House. And then the job is for these 2 teams to come together. And I think that's where you'll see a lot of the perfection. And so if you're concerned about tuition tax waivers, for instance, I think this is where you'll see some relief. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. There are several things that I really like about the tax reform. It is simple. 70% of the people will be able to do it on a postcard-sized piece of paper. Not everybody. My own personal situation will probably mean that I'll still itemize, but those who want to will have a far simpler approach to it. It's more fair. We've eliminated many, many loopholes that have been in the tax code in there. Now, let me tell you why you should all smile as Americans about this. We complain and complain about Congress being influenced by lobbyists, and that lobbyists are driving everything back there. This is the biggest pushback on lobbyists that I've ever seen in my life. This was Congress coming together and saying, we don't care about all these special interests. We're going to do what's right for the American people. And yes, there are winners and losers in it, and some of you as constituents have reached out and said, well, I'm going to miss this or I'm going to miss that. I know you'll miss it, but that was part of the fairness in getting rid of all of those things. And by not allowing too many of them to creep back in, that's how we keep this thing fair. Let me also say that I do support the corporate tax reduction. Having been a business owner, let me tell you what it's like to work your tail off. You know, at my company, we would mortgage our homes every year and put them on the line. And then we would pay every single tax, and then we would pay income tax when it came to us. And to give these businesses who work so hard and invest so much, to bring them so all we're asking is they're just competitive with it on an international basis. We're the 4th highest tax rate in the world right now. We're just not competitive, and so I do support that. And I also like the changes for small business, and I also support in the Senate version even more support that I'm seeing for small businesses. I think that's really important. Now, one of the things that those that I have talked to would like to see in the Senate version come back to the House is this tuition tax waiver. I'm getting a lot of feedback, more feedback on that than anything. And so what that means is if you're a student and you're having your tuition waived, that would then be taxable income to you. And I can see why that alarms a lot of you. Let me tell you how it got into the plan. It got into the plan because that's actually income, and you've got to realize that if you're getting that large benefit, it's income. And what we need to do is decide if this is such an important category that it falls in that category of home mortgage and charitable deductions. And I'm sensing there is a lot of momentum and support. The Senate clearly wants it in their bill, and those in the House that I've talked to want to include it as one of those very, very few provisions that stay in. So right now, if you're a student, I understand that you're concerned. You have a right to be concerned, but please watch the process and know that personally, I will lobby for it to stay on the Senate side. As it comes back to the House, I'll personally lobby for it to stay in the House version as well, as those two merge. Now, finally, let me talk about two things that I've heard over and over again that I just don't believe are 100% true. And one is that this is a tax cut for the rich. Do you know that 94% of our taxes are paid by 20% of the people? There's just no way that you're going to have tax reform without those who pay the taxes. If you're going to reduce taxes, it's going to impact them. And so when people say it's simply a tax cut for the rich, I think they're oversimplifying, and they're just using that to throw bombs at something that otherwise has some very good points. If you feel that way, please take a look at the standard deduction doubling in size from $6,000 to $12,000 for an individual, from $12,000 to $24,000 for a family. It's really significant and large. The increase in the child tax credit from $1,000 to $1,600. Now, the second thing that I've heard that I want to dispute just a little bit is that everybody will get a tax cut. And that's simply also not true. And it's not true if you're in that category that has taken wide advantage of the deductibles that are now eliminated. And part of this fairness was taking those out of the system. And so that is a reality that not everybody will pay lower taxes, and it all just depends on your personal situation. But what you can feel good about is this is a reform that's moving the needle in the right direction for what incentivizes people and what the government does and how they collect money. And those are the reasons that I supported it. And I'm looking forward to the ongoing perfection of this bill as it comes back from the Senate and working on these things that have caused concern, and rightly so. And so please stay in tune as this thing develops, and let me know what additional questions you have. Thank you.